Yes.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. All right, Treasurer Lillard, we have a quorum.
Treasurer Lillard, you are muted.
All right, there we go. This is David Lillard, Chair of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. I want to welcome you to this committee meeting here today. And we'll ask that the roll be called by the Secretary to establish a quorum.
Commissioner Cope? Commissioner Coben?
Here.
Commissioner Matlock? Commissioner Moser?
Here.
Commissioner Stafford? Treasurer Lillard?
Here.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Here.
Treasurer
Okay.
Lillard, you have 4 members present and a quorum.
Okay. All right. The first item of business is we need to adopt a resolution to meet electronically. Madam Secretary, would you read the statement in that regard?
Committee members, all members are participating electronically today. As such, Tennessee Code annotated 844-108B2 requires that the committee make a determination that a necessity exists in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication. A necessity means that the matters to be considered by a public body at a meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. In this case, 2 facts support a determination of necessity. First, today's agenda items require timely action by this committee to meet the Commission's charge to develop a recommendation for the agenda item to be considered by the full Commission on May 16, 2024. Second, scheduling conflicts and other commitments prevented a quorum of members from being physically present today.
All right. With that reading, the chair moves to adopt the statement of necessity. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have a second by Commissioner Coben. No discussion that I see. All right. Would you call the roll, Madam Secretary, on the motion to adopt a statement of necessity?
Commissioner Coben?
Here. Excuse me. Aye.
Commissioner Moser?
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard?
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Aye.
Okay.
Treasurer
So that's
Lillard?
I
Sorry, go
guess
ahead. You have 4
adopted.
ayes.
Thank you. All right. Next item is the adoption of the agenda. We have the agenda that was put out by the staff here, which has 1 item on it principally, plus a couple of other housekeeping items. And the chair will move to adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Seeing no discussion, call the roll on the motion to adopt.
Commissioner Coben?
Aye.
Commissioner Moser?
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard?
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Aye.
Okay, so the item is adopted. Thank you. Next item is public comment. Dr. Gentile, do we have any public comments for today's meeting pursuant to the statute?
No, sir, we've not received a request for official public comment today.
All right, let the record reflect that there are none. Next item is approval of the minutes of January 24, 2024 of this committee. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So move.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Seeing no discussion, call the roll on the motion to adopt the minutes of January 24, 2024.
Commissioner Coben?
Aye.
Commissioner Moser?
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard?
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Okay, motion is adopted then. All right, next item is the regular calendar, which is the item for the 2024-25 binding tuition and fees ranges. This is the first item on our agenda, and Ms. Amanda Clayton, the Chief Strategy Officer, will provide an overview of those ranges.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chairman Miller, members of the committee, for your time this morning. So here, I'm going to go ahead and present for you, for your consideration, binding tuition and total fee, mandatory fee ranges for the 2024-2025 academic year. So first, I want to kind of recap where we left the conversation in November. When we last met, the Commission approved several budgetary items for the 2024-2025 academic year. First, the Commission approved a $17 million increase to recognize growth in our outcomes-based funding. And as part of this, a 3% assumed salary increase was included to better understand the revenue needs for our campuses. As you all know, higher education budgets are really comprised of two core things. We have state appropriations, which includes those outcomes-based funding and salary, and we have tuition and fees, which is what we're here to discuss today. For our institutions to have the option to remain revenue neutral, accounting for that 4.4% core consumer price index that was set back in September when we pulled that data, the THEC tuition model suggested a 0 to 6% range. And again, that's for the option to remain revenue neutral at our campuses. The commission ultimately passed a 0 to 4% guiding range in November. And today, with the close of the legislative session, I can tell you that we have received that $17.2 million for outcomes-based funding, and the General Assembly generously also approved that 3% salary increase, which in the case of higher education is a portion of that salary increase, which represents about $41 million. Under these conditions, most of our institutions will need to tighten their budgets. Based on our model, institutions in the aggregate will need to find approximately $34 million, and they'll do this through a combination of things, which may include reduced salary increases, keeping vacant positions open, and/or increasing that reliance on adjunct teaching. So what I really wanted to talk with you all about this morning is some new information that we've had since the commission met in November to discuss this topic. Earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Labor released final rules updating the Fair Labor Standards Act, also known as the overtime rule. This act establishes minimum wages, overtime pay eligibility, and a few other things. But importantly, what I wanted to talk with you all about this morning is that this final rule will increase the minimum salary level for employees to exempt them from overtime pay. These changes are proposed in two waves, the first taking place July 1st of 2024, and again on January 1st, 2025, as you can see on the slide. You should have also received a summary yesterday from Dr. Gentile summarizing this information from our campuses and the impact that this may have on their campuses. So what I wanted to share is sort of what we know today. If these increases take effect as planned, the change could affect over 3,200 employees across the higher education enterprise with a maximum exposure of nearly $28 million. And in this context, maximum exposure means bringing all of those positions up to this minimum salary point. Importantly, we know that that is likely not going to happen quite like that. Our campuses are really thinking about this on an individual basis. So to contextualize that $28 million number, this equates to roughly a 1.5 percentage point increase in tuition revenue to bring this kind of conversation back to the discussion at hand. So as the CFOs are contemplating on a case-by-case basis what this means for their campuses, they're going to look at those positions and individuals that are working in excess of 40 hours per week. And then they're going to have to make some decisions relating to overtime, which is a liability for the campus's budgets, raising salaries, or reducing hours worked. When we look at the national discussion, we know that the staff that are impacted by this potential change can be often in student affairs or admissions, so really some of our student-facing positions across our campuses. Ultimately, we know that the institutions are looking to maximize overall student services while limiting student costs and institution overtime liability. So I wanted to end my formal remarks with this slide, which represents the maintenance and mandatory fee ranges that were set as guiding ranges back in November. As you all know, the Commission has a responsibility to set the binding tuition and fee ranges, and this supports two important functions. Keeping higher education affordable for Tennesseans and students, and supporting those institutions. As illustrated in your materials, only a few institutions will have earned enough appropriations to cover their portion of this 3% salary increase, which is necessitating thoughtful conversations on the part of our campuses. This issue has been further complicated by this federal guidance relating to overtime pay, which is estimating to cost the campuses approximately $28 million, and again, that's a high-end estimate. In closing, I just wanted to share that things have changed some since we've met in November. I know you have those materials as well as a letter from the Board of Regents in your packets. And we just really wanted to provide that added context for your consideration in setting the binding and tuition and fee ranges for this upcoming academic year. So with that, I've concluded my formal comments and welcome any questions and discussion.
Okay, questions for Ms. Clayton about her presentation here, the matter she's discussed here? All right, let me ask a couple of questions then to start off here. One is in regard to the proposed rules at the federal level about overtime and everything. Is there any possibility that these rules may not be carried into effect, the first phase of them, July 1, 2024, i.e. because of court action or other things? It seems like in today's world, regulatory world, not much goes into effect when it was planned to be because there's usually litigation about it. But I just want to inquire about that for a minute.
There is a little bit of history here that we can call on. We have seen in the past things ultimately not going into effect or delaying that impact, but I have not heard anything specific to this upcoming federal rule.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, you know, on attachment number 2 to the materials that are the board's materials or the committee's materials today, there's a sheet that shows the legislative action of the 3% salary increase. And column C, the resulting column, A plus B equals minus C rather, is what is equal in that column. That shows the amount that's remaining available for operating in the universities and community colleges. Can you explain that a little bit? As that is the amount that is remaining to be covered basically by this salary increase after the state appropriations?
That's correct. So just to walk through that attachment really briefly, column A represents the operating increase that institutions have received through the outcomes-based funding formula. B represents the state portion of the salary increase. Importantly, each sector receives a slightly different share of state funding for that salary increase, the highest share being at the THECs at 80%, community colleges at 67%, and then the 55% of that salary increase at the universities is covered by the state. So that's what's represented in column B. Column C represents that overall 3% salary increase. And then that final column you referred to looks at the remaining dollars available to the campuses after accounting for that full salary increase, both with the inclusion of those state dollars for both the salary and the operating. So as you can see here, several of our institutions are not in the positive when it comes to this overall figure. And so that would mean for the institutions to have that 3% salary increase, they would need to contemplate some various budget decisions.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I would just inquire about whether the universities and community colleges are bringing any operating savings or cost reductions to the table in regard to that remaining amount that they have to cover, or what is the situation with respect to that? I'm kind of isolating the increase factors that we have here, one being the salary increase situation, the other being the proposed overtime rules. Does anyone have any input on that at this point? Staff, THEC?
So in our conversations, these things have related somewhat to personnel. So some of the decisions that have been made in the past from keeping some of those vacant positions open, really thinking through whether that full salary increase will take effect to start off the new fiscal year. But I would also defer, I recognize that there are several CFOs and others on the call who may have some additional insights into their campus specific situation.
All right. And of course, as Dr. Gentile mentioned at the outset, we have a letter from Dr. Tidings of the Tennessee Board of Regents here addressing these and allied issues. And what is the will of the committee? Do we want to hear from representatives of TBR and other institutions about this issue and other issues?
Director Lillard, I think it would be very good to hear 2 or 3 comments from the campuses. I very much would like to hear that.
All right. And let's start with the Tennessee Board of Regents. Can we unmute their representative and have them speak for a minute about these issues?
Good morning, Commission. This is Lisa Fox. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So thank you for inviting us to be on the call today. I appreciate this time to chat with you. As you all received in your materials, Chancellor Tidings did submit a letter related to the tuition range for TVR. And she spoke to this already, but just to clarify a little bit, on our side, again, speaking to the cost-cutting measures, I think that was hit the nail right on the head. Most of our schools are leaving positions unfilled and not hiring in those areas. Again, and a lot of those positions are in student services, which those are our student-facing positions. So obviously those are the areas where you don't want to have open positions, but that is one way that schools are cost cutting. But just to clarify a little bit about cost cutting measures, we calculate on our side the tuition needed by institution to be able to cover that gap, to provide the salary increases, and then just to remain neutral from where we are in the current fiscal year. So to do that, we calculate an average of the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, as well as the HEPI, which is the Higher Education Price Index. And then we take the average of those with an inflationary factor of only 80%. We don't calculate inflation at 100% because we do encourage our schools to implement cost-cutting measures. So we don't want to have our students bear the full impact of that inflationary increase. But as our letter said, for the community colleges, we needed an average of a 3.9% tuition increase just to remain neutral and cover 80% of inflation. And again, that's an average. So we had Rhone State at a high of 4.7% tuition increase needed just to remain neutral, and then a low of 3.5 at Columbia and Dyersburg. So again, this is to remain neutral for us. This isn't to do anything new or offer new programs or new initiatives. Since it does include tuition and mandatory fees, we aren't able to update any of our mandatory fees to do things that we would like to do because all of our schools need the minimum tuition increase just to remain neutral. We have a college that wants to implement a student health services center at their college and would like to implement a mandatory fee to be able to do that and offer free health services to their students. But again, we're unable to do that because we are tied to the binding range, which won't allow us to add a mandatory fee, or else we would have to drop our tuition rate down to about 1.4%, which obviously wouldn't cover any of the expenses for any of our other colleges. And then when you throw on this fair labor standards wrench in the middle of this and looking at that, we're looking at 2.5 million cost there if we move forward with all these implementations. So it really is, we would just appreciate consideration of giving us some flexibility in that binding fee range based on the data that THEC has provided, the changing environment we're in here, and understanding that our schools are doing the best they can. We are encouraging cuts. They are being more efficient in lots of ways, but again, just these are the times we live in. We got high inflationary costs. We're just trying to do the best we can for our students.
That's understood, and appreciate your good remarks about that and everything. I just would like to ask if y'all have done any calculations at TBR, at your member institutions, about while the range that the tuition model suggests, as Dr. Tidings pointed out in her letter, is 0 to 6%, and the commission adopted 0 to 4%. Is there some place between 4% and 6% that these cost increases would indicate to you would be necessary or appropriate in terms of an increase in the maximum range of the guiding range, and taking into account this potential rule change with regard to overtime? Have y'all done any calculations like that?
So as far as on our end, we have calculated, as I said, if we keep tuition, we can remain in the binding range or the guiding range currently of 0 to 4 for our community colleges and TCATs. by just doing tuition. But if we, and that would be just to remain neutral and just to cover our percent of the 3% raises. If we were to implement any of the overtime rules and also approve any mandatory fees that have been presented to us for consideration, we would be closer to the a range of 0 to 5.5%, 5.5%, as far as what we needed. And then our plan would be to do a 3.9% tuition increase and then approve the mandatory fees that have been presented to the board. And we feel the 0 to 5.5 would be able to cover the overtime rule if implemented, as well as mandatory fees and tuition.
Right. Hey, any other questions from commission members of the TDR representative? All right.
I've got a question. How
Yes.
successful have we been in asking the schools to cut expenses? I know we talk about it, we ask them to do it. In reality, how successful have we been in asking them to do that?
I'm not sure, Commissioner Lillard, if that was directed to me, but I'll take a stab at it, and I'll be happy to let any of my fellow institutional representatives chime in here too. But I know for TBR specifically, our operating expense, 80 to 85% of that is personnel. So there's not a lot of cost cutting as far as other operating dollars. You're looking at about 15% of your budget to be able to implement cost savings measures without impacting the personnel. So again, I think as far as cost cutting on the personnel side, that plays out in those open positions that remain unfilled that schools carry open until they have more funding to be able to hire those back. But I do know a lot of our schools have, on the physical plant side, have done a lot of things to try to be more efficient with their building usage and running reports as far as when they have buildings open and trying to be more efficient with utilities and things like that. But yes, we definitely have encouraged that at the system office. And we've asked for the schools to submit those things to us in the past so we could keep a record to submit to anybody that wants to see it, what we've been working on as far as cost reductions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other institutional representatives who want to be heard on these issues that we've been discussing here, including the questions that I asked earlier of the TBR representative?
Treasurer Lillard, I heard from Shaw Rouge from Austin P and David Miller from University of Tennessee. He could speak to this as well.
Okay.
So sure, I think we promoted all the CFOs, and just in case they did want to speak.
Okay.
So Shaw Rouge from Austin P.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Commissioner. So I echo the comments of our friends at TBR. They hit the nail on the head on what we're all facing. At Austin P, I can say that while we're in Clarksville, we're still the Nashville metropolitan service area. So we are trying to compete with the increased wages in that area, and the impacts of the range can go far for us on being able to support our operations. As far as the cost cutting, the university has been very diligent in working towards what we add extra without first considering all of our historical expenditures and trying to make it work without adding additional expense, but recategorizing expenses and eliminating redundancies and trying to become more self-sufficient. But with the looming concerns on the overtime rules, we are more concerned about the compression factor that's going to come from the changes with the new exempt salaries, creating not just folks being paid minimum $58,000 at the exempt level, but then their supervisors needing to get increases. Folks across campus at different job levels of responsibility needing to get increases if this is the new minimum standard. So trying to keep up with that as well, we are in need of being able to secure the assets to do so.
Okay, if I could ask, like on attachment 2 of the materials that the committee has before it here on Austin P, it's showing a shortfall of salary, just looking at the salary increase portion of this of $1,359,000. Are you prepared to cover that with the cost reductions or other mechanisms, or are you believing that the binding range needs to be increased just to deal with that issue alone, separating the two a bit?
Well, we'll certainly do what's necessary, and the binding range will help, but the cost reductions, without, as Ms. Fox said, we're almost in the same boat. Without eliminating roles, it would be extremely difficult to get to the new range, to the new compensation level.
Okay. All right. We wanted to recognize David Miller from University of Tennessee.
David Miller, are you on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm hearing somebody. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. Okay, we're getting some background noise there.
Now, Stephen?
All right, Mr. Miller, are you on?
Can you hear me now, Stephen?
David, we can hear you, but you're very faint.
Okay. I just downloaded WebEx. I haven't used it before. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I've got the volume for the mic all the way up. Can you hear it now?
Good.
Okay. For the University of Tennessee, we want to make several points that we never consider the binding range as a maximum to raise tuition. Over the last 5 years, including the average of 3% tuition for this fall that we're looking at, we have averaged less than 1% increase per year. So we've had several years, 4 out of 5 years at UT Knoxville with 0 increases. So we don't consider the binding range a maximum that we're going to raise tuition to. We look at our business case, our costs, and we've achieved this through strong enrollment, through cost containment, and reallocation of existing spending. We are constantly reallocating spending from lower priorities to higher priorities. In terms of cost drivers, there are 3 primary cost drivers that we're constantly faced with. The first is compensation. While the state pay plans have been good, as the staff have pointed out, they're not fully funded for formula units. And we are finding that in recruitment and retention, actual cost increases exceed what we've had in the state pay plans. In other words, if you look at our salary spend, it's going to be higher than a 3% increase through increased employment, because at a growing institution, especially Knoxville, we have to hire more people to teach and provide services to students. But competitive salaries are going up faster than the state pay plans, are my point. We have to cover those costs as well. Technology is one of our fastest growing costs. We are instituting across the entire system an entirely new IT security suite to combat the 1 million hits per day we get from attackers on our IT security infrastructure. That's a whole new cost that we have to generate revenue from reallocations to cover, and facilities maintenance. We try to do a lot of facilities maintenance out of our own operational dollars. So we have a lot of cost drivers. But we support, our official position is we support the range of 0 to 4 recommended by the staff, and we will be able to work within that and keep tuition below the maximum of that range. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, David. Any questions of CFO Miller by commission members? All right, seeing none, do we have other institutional representatives who want to be heard from? We just got a few minutes here to conclude these comments. Okay, Dr. Gentile, anybody else seeking recognition?
Oh, sorry. No, Treasurer Lillard, you don't have any further words.
All right, very good. Okay, commission members, we're back on discussion of the matter which is before us, which is the 2024-25 binding tuition and fees ranges. Does anyone have any comments about where we are on this? I'll just start by saying that the commission has adopted the guiding range of 0 to 4. I'm normally loath to depart from that at this particular point. But there is the issue of these increases that are possible as a result of these changes in overtime by the federal government, the overtime rules and all. I think if we were going to depart from what the commission had previously adopted as a guiding range, we'd need to have some more input from the affected institutions about exactly what that might look like. As we see in the letter from Dr. Tidings, she's pointing out that the tuition fee model of the staff of THEC recommended or pointed toward a 0 to 6% range. Any comments or thoughts by commission members?
Mr. Treasurer?
Yes, sir, Comptroller.
I believe what we have heard today indicates something that I believe is true, and that is that the state of Tennessee is large. I am in Tennessee right now, but I am closer to Toronto, Canada than Memphis. I believe that the costs experienced by universities and institutions across the state, community colleges, TCATs, are different based on the market they are in. And with the circumstances we have, I believe we need to put a little faith and trust in the individual boards of trustees and other boards that run these institutions. I think that we would be doing I'm all for cost cutting and cost controls, but I feel strongly that this is not a one size fits all situation. What fits Northeast State, might not fit a community college in West Tennessee. Our urban areas, have different markets than our rural areas. At some point in time, we have to put faith in these people that the governor has nominated and the legislature has confirmed to run these institutions. And it's hard for me to see how we, as an oversight board, are doing a service to anyone by binding them at 0 to 4 based on the circumstances we have going on right now. If we set, for example, a 0 to 6 range, these schools, these boards of trustees can still decide to stay under that. The decision is not ours, it is theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we bind them in a way that hamstrings them, which I mean, it's well known that I have many thoughts about. But I mean, this is just a real world situation, and we've heard from three people who have three very different circumstances.
Mhm.
That's my opinion. And you know, I think, as you just heard Mr. Miller say, University of Tennessee is set to stay within a 0 to 4. Well, I mean, if we pass a 0 to 6, they can still stay in that 0 to 4. That's their opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other views by commissioners at this point?
Treasurer Lillard, I would like to ask a question of Director Gentile. Stephen, when I look at this attachment 2, and I look at the far right column where we have A plus B minus C, help me with my memory here. Most schools, regardless of the type of school it is, are in the red in this column. How often do we see that?
Commissioner Coben, I would like to go back and provide more of a history for you. We could do that following this meeting. However, I would say in more recent years, with the inflation being as high as it has been since 2021, we've seen it more and more often. It hasn't been every year. 2 years ago, for instance, where we received upwards of $150 million from the state to meet inflation. It was going, that number in the far right column was much lower, but we can follow up. But I just want to say, in comparison to 8 years ago, before when inflation was really high, it wasn't that high. Because also back then, salary increases from the state were not 3% or 5% like they were last year. They were more in the 2%, 2.5% range. So I think it's more been a phenomenon of recent years due to the inflation.
Okay. I do have one more question. I'm sorry. We keep referring to the fact that many of the positions that are open and subject now to a hiring freeze are student-centered positions. Why are we seeing such turnover in that area versus residence halls or janitorial services or something else?
Commissioner Coben, I'm sorry, Amanda, do you have a response to that?
I don't have a specific response. I'd be happy, though, to gather some input from our CFOs as it relates to those positions that are vacant to get a better sense for you, Pam, or Commissioner Coben, if that would be useful.
But I do believe Vice Chancellor Alicia Fox spoke to this when she was just speaking. And so I would defer to her. Alicia, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Stephen. Now, I would just say for our schools, we're seeing, frankly, a lot of turnover in a lot of positions on campus coming out of the pandemic. And people are just looking for more remote jobs, more opportunities to work from home, making big life changes. So in general, we're seeing a lot of turnover in a lot of our areas on campus. Not as much, as you mentioned, janitorial, not as much in janitorial and facilities and things like that, but those were also employees that are mainly on ground and remained working in the physical environment during COVID. So it's really more of the positions that were remote during the pandemic and now we're back on campus that we're seeing some turnover in those areas. But unfortunately, it's campus wide.
And if I may speak personally to that, I used to work on a campus in a student-facing admission and financial aid role, and I believe I shared this with Treasurer Lillard yesterday. The salaries do tend to be not competitive with things that are outside of those campuses, and that paired with the fact that what Alicia just spoke to, of the yearn for more flexibility when it comes to work. They don't have that at campuses as they're on the ground there and go in every single day. And the work from home that is elsewhere in the economy is not experienced there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners at this point or discussion on this matter? In the TBR, Vice Chancellor talked earlier, I think she spoke of a tuition upper range of 5.5% was necessary if the overtime rules carry into effect, for instance. And that's a complicating factor at this point because on the one hand, we've got to set this guiding range probably by this commission meeting. It's coming up next week. But on the other hand, as I said earlier in my remarks, it's possible this whole thing of the overtime rules may get delayed by litigation at the federal level. And so it may or may not actually come to fruition. Of course, the comptroller's point is well taken that if we set it at a different level than 4% maximum, then that doesn't mean an institution has to go to that percentage. They can obviously adopt a lower percentage. It's simply an upper range. So what is the will of the committee in this regard?
Mr. Treasurer, I'll make a motion. We set a recommended range of 0 to 6%.
Okay, we have a motion for 0 to 6%. Is there a second for that motion? I'll second it to get it on the table to discuss it and everything. I guess, again, I just raised the issue, comptroller and others, about, again, the one input we've had on that has been 0 to 5.5% was necessary if those rules carried fully into effect. If they don't, then, what I've heard here today is that most institutions, not all, but a lot of institutions would be able to affect cost-saving measures that would cover the amount shown on attachment number 2 as the amount they still have to cover in terms of salary increase here. But
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and I understand and agree with that point. The two questions I would have is when will we know about the finality of those rules, and because it seems like we will not know by next Thursday in time to affect it, and again, I think my point that I think continues to be overriding is, when are we going to put any faith in the trustees that have been nominated by the governor and confirmed by the legislature? Or, because they, just because we create a range, they do not have to top it out. And everybody here has expressed today that our expectation is that they first implement cost controls. Because whatever tuition rate they set is on them. It is not on us. When the legislature passed the Focus Act, they handed that baton to these individual boards. We are, just setting a range. They are the ones who decide what their tuition rate is.
all right, comptroller, would you accept a friendly amendment to move your upper range bound amount from 6% to 5.5%?
That's fine.
Okay. Or is there any objection to a friendly amendment being accepted on that point? Seeing none, so ordered. So the motion is now 0 to 5.5%. Commissioner Coburn, Commissioner Moser, do you have any comments before we vote on this matter?
I think that makes a lot more comfortable. I like it.
Okay.
Yep, I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. Dr. Gentile, any comments from you or the THEC staff?
You can take your vote.
No further comments. No, but Rachel, I know you need to take a vote. Yeah.
Okay. We have a motion that's been made and thoroughly discussed with input from institutions, et cetera. So, Ms. Hitt, would you call the roll on the motion to adopt the range of 0 to 5.5%?
Commissioner Coburn?
Aye.
Commissioner Moser?
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard?
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 4 votes aye, that motion is adopted. And I think we all take to heart and will indicate to the full commission when they act on this and to the commissions that are present next Thursday that Comptroller Mumpower's points are extremely well taken, that just because the range ends at 5.5% doesn't mean you automatically have to go to that. So we expect institutions will be extremely prudent as they have been in the past on this issue. So, or is there any other, we've got a question of other business. Is there any other business to come before
Mr. Treasurer,
Yes,
Treasurer.
Yes, Comptroller.
Thank you, and thank you to my fellow commission members. Your ending point there is exactly right. Not only, and that's something we will be looking at. We will be looking at what these trustees decide to do. But also at our full meeting next week, in what time is available between now and then, I would like to ask THEC staff to be able to articulate what thought is given, what work is done to evaluate the differences between campuses, the differences between markets based on geography, of different cost inputs experienced at different campuses. Because it does not cost the same thing, at every, we don't have apples to apples comparison, university to university, community college to community college, just based on simple geographic markets. And so anything that THEC staff you can be prepared to add on that next Thursday, I'll be asking a question about it.
We can certainly prepare for that. Thank you.
All right. And as I said earlier, I think we'll regard the remarks of Comptroller Mumpower about the range and being as economical as possible within the range as the will of the committee in regard to the matter that we've adopted today. Is there anything further to come before the committee today? If not, Chair would move. Yes,
Treasurer Lord, I just want to add in for our institution partners and our commissioners as well. We are committed to making this discussion here for binding move up into the calendar year for next year. Those are conversations we've had internally. We've heard feedback from institutions. And so as we discuss next year's calendar dates for commission meetings, we are urging to move this up so that to give the institutions more time to respond as well.
Okay. All right. And we also want to thank all our institutional representatives that have been on the committee meeting here today for your participation and your input. All right. Does anything further come before the committee? If not, we're just a few minutes beyond 1 hour of time here, so very economical in that regard. I'll move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
I call the roll on the motion to adjourn. Ms. Hitt.
Commissioner Coben?
Aye.
Commissioner Moser?
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard?
Aye.
Comptroller Mumpower?
Aye. Thank you.
Okay, motion is adopted. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week at the commission meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.